There is a moment, and it doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't announce itself. It slips in quietly, like a shadow over your shoulder, and suddenly you're sitting in a room you've been in 1,000 times, but it doesn't feel like yours anymore. The pictures on the wall don't speak to you. The mirror stops recognizing you. And every little thing feels just a little too much, too heavy to carry, too loud to hear through, too blurry to see clearly. It's not the kind of moment people notice from the outside. You can still smile, you still show up, you still say I'm fine with practiced ease. But deep down, you know something has shifted. There's a silence in your spirit, a kind of quiet ache you can't explain to anyone, because even you don't fully understand where it came from or how long it's been building. And what's so difficult about this silent breaking point is that it doesn't always come with a crisis. It's not always marked by loss or failure or disaster. Sometimes it comes in the middle of routine, in the middle of normal, when everything looks okay but nothing feels okay. You wake up one morning and realize you're exhausted, not from doing too much, but from pretending too much. You start to notice how heavy your smile has become. You feel the weight of being strong for everyone. You feel the echo in your chest when no one checks in, when no one asks, "But how are you really?" And you wonder, have I disappeared inside my own life? Have I become invisible, even to myself? There's a loneliness that lives in that space, a loneliness that's not about being around people or not. It's about being seen, being understood. You could be surrounded by noise, laughter, conversation, and still feel like you're on the outside looking in. And that kind of isolation, when it happens inside your own skin, is the hardest to name, let alone heal. You try to push through, because that's what you've always done. You're the one who keeps going, who holds things together. But something inside is whispering now, and it's not weakness, it's truth. It's the quiet knowing that something has to change, that you can't keep carrying everything, especially when you feel like nothing is carrying you. You remember a time when you had energy, when you had joy, when you had hope, and now it feels like you're running on memory, not fuel. You keep moving, but the light inside flickers. You don't even know what you need. You just know you can't keep pretending not to need anything. And maybe the scariest part is that you don't scream, you don't cry out, you don't break down in a way that others can see. You just slowly fade, one thought at a time, one breath at a time, until you begin to wonder if anyone would notice if you disappeared, even if that disappearance is emotional, not physical. And in that wondering, in that quiet fear, something starts to wake up. Something begins to stir beneath the silence. Hope isn't always the grand speech, the booming music, the lightning bolt of motivation that shows up just in time. It isn't always a sunrise that takes your breath away, or a stranger's kindness that restores your faith. Sometimes hope is barely there, a faint hum in the background of your spirit, so soft you wonder if you imagined it, so still it feels like maybe it left altogether. There are moments when hope doesn't shine, it flickers. It hides behind exhaustion, behind grief, behind the 1,000 little disappointments that add up over time. In those moments, you don't feel inspired. You don't feel brave. You feel numb. And that numbness can be the scariest place to be, because it makes you question whether you'll ever feel anything again. You look around at other people who seem to be moving forward, living, laughing, building, and you wonder what happened to you. Where did your spark go? You used to dream, you used to believe in better days, but now you just want to make it through the day without breaking down. And when people tell you to stay positive, you smile politely, but inside, the silence is deafening. It's in that silence that you start to realize something, that maybe hope doesn't always show up as a roar. Maybe it doesn't need to shout to be real. Maybe hope, at its purest, is the choice to keep going, even when the path is invisible. Maybe it's not a shout, but a whisper that says, not yet. A whisper that says, breathe. A whisper that says, stay. There's a kind of hope that isn't about feeling better right away. It's about believing that the emptiness won't last forever. It's trusting that you won't always feel as lost as you do right now. And that kind of trust doesn't need noise. It just needs one quiet moment when you say to yourself, maybe I don't have to give up today. Sometimes hope is in the smallest actions. Taking a shower when you don't want to, answering one message, drinking water, stepping outside for 5 minutes, not because you're suddenly okay, but because something deep down inside you refuses to let go completely. And that something, that tiny flicker, that is hope, even if it doesn't feel like it. You may not feel strong, you may not feel brave, but hope isn't about feeling, it's about staying. It's about staying in your life, even when you don't recognize it. Staying in your body, even when it feels tired. Stay in the conversation, even when the words are hard to say. Hope is the gentle presence that keeps showing up, even when it has no words left. You can't always hear it. You can't always see it, but the fact that you're still here, still breathing, still listening, still reaching for something, means that hope is too. Not loud, not bright, not certain, but present. Quietly, stubbornly. Rock bottom doesn't come with warning signs. It doesn't wait until you're ready. It doesn't knock gently and ask if now is a good time. It drops you. Sometimes suddenly, sometimes slowly, over months or years, until one day you look around and realize there's nothing left holding you up. The job is gone. The relationship has crumbled. The mask has slipped. The version of yourself you tried so hard to maintain has fallen apart. You find yourself in a place you never thought you'd be. Maybe it's a hospital room. Maybe it's an empty house. Maybe it's just the stillness of 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling, wondering who you've become. It's disorienting. You don't recognize your own life. Everything familiar has been stripped away. There's nothing left to distract you from yourself, but there's something else in that space too, something raw and unfiltered. There's a strange kind of honesty that only shows up when you've got nothing left to prove. You stop pretending. You stop performing. You stop trying to convince the world and yourself that everything's okay. And in that surrender, in that unraveling, the truth begins to rise. Truth that you've been carrying too much for too long. Truth that you've silenced parts of yourself just to be accepted, just to belong. Truth that the life you were chasing may not have been yours to begin with. Rock bottom doesn't just strip away circumstances, it strips away illusion. It forces you to see what you couldn't see when you were too busy surviving. And with that clarity comes discomfort. There's grief in letting go of the version of your life you imagined. There's fear in stepping into the unknown. But there's also something else, something quiet but powerful. The realization that maybe, just maybe, now you get to choose differently. Now you get to rebuild, not from expectation, but from truth. Transformation doesn't begin in comfort. It begins in that messy, uncertain space where you're too broken to pretend and too tired to keep running. It begins when you say, I don't know what's next, but I can't keep living like this. It begins in the questions, not the answers. In the darkness, not the light. People will tell you that hitting bottom is failure. But the truth is, rock bottom is a foundation. It's the place where the noise stops and you start hearing your own voice again. Maybe for the first time in years. And that voice might be shaky, it might be soft, but it's yours. And it's honest. And it's ready to be heard. Because when you're at the bottom, you stop climbing toward what doesn't matter. You stop chasing things that never fed your soul. And in that stillness, you begin to feel what's real. You begin to see the parts of yourself that were buried under performance, perfection, and pressure. And in that seeing, something inside you stirs. Surrender is one of the most misunderstood words in our lives. We're taught from the beginning to fight, to strive, to push through. To let go, we're told, is to quit. To surrender is to lose. But that kind of thinking keeps us in survival mode, gripping tightly to things, people, and identities that no longer serve us, simply because we're afraid of what it might mean to release them. There comes a point when holding on hurts more than letting go. When clenching your fists around something broken begins to bleed into every part of your life, and yet letting go feels terrifying. It feels like stepping into a fog with no map, no guarantee, no control. But surrender isn't about giving your power away. It's about reclaiming it from everything that was never truly yours to carry. You start to realize that surrender doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough to stop forcing what isn't working. You stop begging for love in places that keep you starving. You stop chasing validation from people who don't see you. You stop exhausting yourself trying to fix what was never your fault to begin with. There's a sacred strength in surrender that doesn't roar. It whispers. It says, "This is not mine anymore." It says, "I choose peace over chaos." It says, "I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to stop pretending that I do." And in that moment, something shifts. The weight begins to lift. Not all at once, but enough to breathe. You begin to notice the spaces that were crowded by your resistance. The emotional clutter that filled your heart starts to clear, and suddenly there's room for stillness, for grace, for possibility. You didn't know how much energy you were spending holding everything together until you finally allowed yourself to stop. And in the quiet that follows, you meet a part of yourself you haven't heard from in a long time. This part of you doesn't need to win, doesn't need to prove, doesn't need to perform. This part of you simply wants to be free, to feel peace that isn't dependent on outcomes, to find joy that isn't conditional, to love without begging, to exist without explanation. That's what surrender gives you, not escape, but expansion. Sometimes surrender looks like walking away. Sometimes it looks like staying, but with new boundaries. Sometimes it's saying yes, sometimes it's saying no. But whatever shape it takes, it's always rooted in truth. Not the truth others handed you, but the truth you uncover when you finally stop fighting the wrong battles. And as you release the need to control what was never yours to hold, you begin to feel something unexpected, relief. Not because everything is fixed, but because you no longer have to hold your breath waiting for something outside of you to save you. You realize you were never meant to carry all of it alone. There are moments when you look in the mirror and feel like a stranger is staring back. The eyes are yours, but the light is gone. The smile is forced, the energy is manufactured. You start to wonder if maybe all the pieces of you that once felt strong, joyful, confident, maybe they just faded away. And no matter how many affirmations you recite, you can't feel them anymore. It's hard to explain to people what that kind of emptiness feels like, because it's not always loud. It doesn't always come with tears. Sometimes it just sits there, quiet, hollow, familiar. You go through the motions, you show up, you smile on cue. But inside, something is missing. Or at least that's what it feels like. It feels like your light went out somewhere along the way and you didn't even see it happen. But what if the light didn't go out? What if it just got buried? Buried under heartbreak, under rejection, under years of trying to be what everyone else needed you to be. What if the light is still there, faint, flickering, but waiting for you to stop searching outside yourself for permission to shine again? You are not empty. You've been poured into others for so long that you forgot what it feels like to be full. You've given your time, your energy, your love, and somewhere along the way, you forgot to give it back to yourself. But even now, even in the quiet, the tired, the fragile space you're in, you are not broken. You are tired from carrying more than your share, from holding yourself together when no one saw how hard it was. There is a part of you that has never left, the part that survived every version of pain, the part that kept you going when you didn't know how, the part that whispered, "One more day," when everything else told you to give up. That part is still here. That part is your spark, and no one can take it away from you. Not loss, not failure, not even time. You've spent so much energy proving your worth, trying to earn what was always yours to begin with. You forgot that your existence is enough, that you don't have to be perfect to be powerful, that your softness is not weakness, that your ability to feel deeply is not a flaw, it's a gift. And that gift is still alive in you, even if the world taught you to hide it. Sometimes it takes quiet to remember who you are. Sometimes it takes falling apart to realize that the pieces you're putting back together now, they're more honest, more whole than the version you were before. And when you begin to remember that your light never left, you also begin to understand that you don't need to be rescued. You just need to reconnect. That reconnection doesn't come from doing more, doesn't come from fixing yourself because you're not broken. It comes from listening to the part of you that already knows, that already believes, that's been waiting patiently for you to remember what was never truly lost. There are days when just opening your eyes feels like a battle, when the weight of everything hits before your feet even touch the floor. On those days, getting out of bed isn't just a routine. It's an act of courage. It's a silent decision to keep showing up, even when you're not sure why, even when the world feels too heavy and your body feels too tired. We don't always celebrate those moments. We skip past them like they don't matter, but they do. Choosing to move, however slowly, however clumsily, is a declaration that your story isn't over. It's not flashy, it doesn't make headlines, but it matters, because survival doesn't always look like thriving. Sometimes it looks like brushing your teeth, sending one text, or sitting with your pain without trying to escape it. There is real power in small steps. The world teaches us to chase big wins, bold moves, and visible success. But what about the invisible victories? The quiet moments when you could have crumbled but didn't. The times you said, "I'm still here," not to anyone else, but to yourself. As a reminder that even in this moment, you haven't given up. When you feel broken, it's easy to believe that healing has to look like a dramatic change. But healing often begins in the ordinary, in drinking a glass of water, in putting on clean clothes, in stepping outside and feeling the sun on your skin, even if just for a minute. These aren't small because they're easy, they're small because they're personal, because they meet you where you are, not where the world expects you to be. And no one else can measure what those steps cost you. No one else can see how much strength it takes to answer a phone call when you're full of anxiety, to eat when your appetite is gone, to speak up when your voice is shaking. But those moments build something real inside you. They stitch together a sense of worth, one decision at a time. Sometimes you don't realize how far you've come because the steps have been so small. But inch by inch, breath by breath, you've kept moving, and that movement has meaning. You didn't quit on yourself, even when everything in you wanted to. And that quiet persistence, that choice to stay, is one of the bravest things a person can do. There's no timeline for healing, no finish line you need to cross to prove you're okay. The small steps count, they always have. They are the moments that keep the darkness from swallowing you whole. They are the reminders that something in you still believes in life, even when your heart is aching, even when you feel numb, even when hope is a whisper. You're not lazy, you're not weak, you're not behind. You're doing the hard work of staying, of trying, of reaching. And that work is sacred. That work is saving you, whether anyone else sees it or not. Pain shows up uninvited. It enters quietly sometimes, building slowly until one day you can't ignore it. Other times it crashes through your life like a wave, sudden, overwhelming, and impossible to hide from. And in that moment, all you want is for it to stop. You want relief, answers, closure. But pain rarely works on your timeline. We're taught to run from pain, to distract ourselves, to push through, to numb, to deny. But pain doesn't go away just because we ignore it. It waits. It lingers. Because it's not here to ruin us. It's here to reveal something. It's a message from the parts of ourselves we've silenced, a call from within, asking to be acknowledged, not buried. Sometimes pain is pointing to a wound that never healed, a memory you boxed away, a boundary you keep letting others cross, a truth you've been too afraid to admit. It doesn't come to punish, it comes to protect. It says something here needs your attention. It asks you to slow down, to listen, to finally turn toward what you've been avoiding. That turning inward is uncomfortable. It's easier to stay busy, to stay distracted, to pretend you're fine. But pain will keep knocking until you open the door. And when you do, it may feel like everything falls apart. But what's really happening is the beginning of release, the beginning of honesty, the beginning of healing. You don't have to understand the lesson right away. Sometimes all you can do is sit with the ache and let it be real. Let it speak. Let it remind you of your needs, your worth, your limits. That heartbreak, that burnout, that anxiety, they're all trying to tell you something about where you've abandoned yourself, about where you've been too silent for too long. We live in a world that celebrates strength, but forgets that strength also means softness. It means being willing to feel deeply, even when it's uncomfortable. Pain doesn't make you weak. If anything, the courage to face it makes you stronger than most, because anyone can pretend, but few are willing to feel. Pain is not forever. It moves, it shifts, it teaches. And as it does, it clears space. It clears the noise. It reveals the deeper layers of who you are, the resilient parts, the wise parts, the parts that are ready to grow. You don't have to force that growth. You don't have to rush the lesson. You just have to allow it to unfold, one breath at a time. There will come a moment, maybe quietly, when you realize you're not the same person you were before the pain. You're softer in places that were once hard. You're clearer about what matters. You're more present, more grounded, more honest. Not because you wanted the pain, but because you were brave enough to learn from it. There are moments in life when the story takes a turn you didn't see coming. A loss, a betrayal, a failure, a breakdown, something that rewrites the narrative without your permission. Suddenly, the life you were building no longer makes sense. The plans unravel, the characters change, and the chapter you're in feels like it was written by someone else entirely. It's easy to believe in those moments that the story is no longer yours, that you're just a character now, reacting, surviving, drifting. You read the words written by pain, by other people's choices, by circumstances you couldn't control, and you begin to forget that you ever held the pen, that you ever had the right to decide what happens next. But you do. Even when the plot feels stolen, the pen has always been within reach. It may be buried beneath grief or shame or exhaustion, but it's there. And picking it up again doesn't require you to fix everything. It just requires one honest sentence, one decision to no longer let this chapter define the entire book. You are not the worst thing that ever happened to you. You are not the heartbreak or the mistake or the silence that followed. Those moments are part of your story, but they are not the whole of it. And reclaiming the pen means daring to imagine that who you are becoming matters more than what tried to break you. Sometimes rewriting your life means choosing a softer tone. Sometimes it means changing the setting, letting go of toxic characters, or tearing out pages filled with lies you were taught to believe about yourself. It takes courage to edit a story others have written for you. It takes even more to write your own truth in its place. You don't need to know how the story ends. You just need to know that it hasn't ended yet. You're still here, still breathing, still capable of surprising yourself. And that means the power to shape what's next is still in your hands. Even if your hand is trembling, even if your voice is shaking, you can still speak into the silence and create something new. This isn't about pretending the hard parts didn't happen. It's about giving them context, giving yourself compassion, making sure the pain doesn't get the final word. You get to say what the pain meant, what it taught you, what it awakened in you, and you get to choose what you build from it, who you become because of it. Maybe today is not about writing a new chapter. Maybe it's just about reclaiming your name, your voice, your pace. Maybe it's simply placing your hand on the page and remembering you are the author, and that power was never lost, only forgotten.